Right now, somewhere in your house, there's a version of you that you've never met. It shows up almost every single night. It has your face, your voice, sometimes even your memories, but it does things you would never do while awake. It flies. It runs from things that don't exist. It kisses people it shouldn't. It cries over things that never happened. And then, the moment you open your eyes, it vanishes completely, like it was never there at all. That version of you is the one that comes out when you sleep. And here's the strange part. You don't control it. You don't choose what it does. You just watch, trapped inside your own skull, as your mind writes a story you have zero say in. Honestly, when you really sit with that, it's a little unsettling. Think about it. For roughly a third of your life, you disappear. Your body lies still, your eyes stay shut, and somewhere behind them, an entire world builds itself out of nothing. Somebody you haven't thought about in 10 years shows up at a dinner party that's somehow also your childhood home. You're being chased, but your legs won't move. You're falling, and just before you hit the ground, you wake up gasping, heart pounding like you actually fell. Where does all of that come from? And more importantly, why does your brain bother doing it at all? Here's the thing. For most of human history, people assumed dreams meant something mystical. Ancient Egyptians believed dreams were messages from the gods. The Greeks thought they were visits from the dead. Entire temples were built specifically for people to sleep in, hoping the gods would speak to them in their sleep. Even now, plenty of people still check dream dictionaries a morning after a strange one, hoping to decode some hidden warning. But modern psychology tells a very different story. And believe it or not, it's actually far more fascinating than any myth. Let's start with the obvious question. What actually happens in your brain when you fall asleep? You'd think, logically, that your brain would just power down, like a phone going into low battery mode. But that's not even close to what happens. Your brain doesn't switch off. In some ways, it gets busier. Certain regions, especially the ones tied to emotion, memory, and imagination, actually become more active during sleep than they are during your waking hours. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic, self-control, and rational thinking, goes quiet. That single detail explains almost everything strange about dreams. Think about the last weird dream you had. Maybe you were talking to your dead grandmother like it was totally normal. Maybe you were at work, but work was somehow also the ocean. In the dream, none of that felt strange. You didn't stop and think, wait, this makes no sense. You just went along with it. That's because the part of your brain responsible for questioning logic, the part that would normally say, hold on, this is impossible, has basically clocked out for the night. So your emotional brain takes the wheel. And your emotional brain doesn't care about logic. It cares about feeling. This is where it gets interesting. Because if your emotional brain is running the show while you sleep, that means your dreams aren't just random noise. They're actually a fairly accurate map of what's going on inside you emotionally, even the stuff you haven't consciously admitted to yourself yet. Ever had a dream about a person you haven't spoken to in years, and woken up feeling strangely emotional about them? That's not a coincidence. Your brain doesn't just forget people. It files them away, along with the feelings attached to them. And sometimes when your conscious mind isn't standing guard, those old feelings resurface in dream form, almost like your brain saying, hey, we never actually finished processing this. There's a psychologist named Rosalind Cartwright who spent decades studying this exact thing. She found that dreams tend to reflect our most pressing emotional concerns, especially the ones we haven't fully processed while awake. People going through divorce, for example, often dream repeatedly about their former partner, not because they miss them necessarily, but because the brain is still working through the emotional wreckage. It's like your mind running background software, quietly cleaning up files you didn't even know were still open. That's honestly one of the most human things about dreaming. It's not random. It's personal. It's your own mind trying to make sense of your own life, using symbols and stories instead of straightforward thoughts. But why symbols? Why can't your brain just tell you directly, hey, you're stressed about your job, or hey, you're scared of losing this relationship? This is where things get a little more complicated, and honestly, a lot more interesting. One theory, originally proposed by Sigmund Freud, suggested that dreams are disguised wishes. According to Freud, your mind hides your true desires behind symbols because those desires are too uncomfortable, too shameful, or too socially unacceptable to face directly. So instead of dreaming about what you actually want, your brain wraps it in a costume. A house might represent your body. Flying might represent freedom. Losing your teeth might represent anxiety about aging or loss of control. Now, modern psychology doesn't fully agree with Freud on all of this. A lot of his specific interpretations have been challenged or outright debunked over the decades. But the core idea that dreams often express things we're not ready to face head-on while awake still holds up surprisingly well. Here's a more modern explanation that most researchers actually favor today. It's called the threat simulation theory, and honestly, once you hear it, it makes a lot of sense. The idea is this: dreaming evolved as a kind of practice space, a flight simulator for danger. Back when humans lived in far more dangerous environments, surrounded by predators, rival tribes, and constant physical threats, dreaming may have served as a way for the brain to rehearse dangerous situations without any real risk. That's why so many dreams involve being chased, falling, or facing some kind of threat. Your brain is essentially running drills. Think about it like this. If you've ever had a dream where you're being chased by something terrifying, and you wake up with your heart racing, that's not just your imagination messing with you. That's your nervous system actually practicing a fight or flight response. Your body doesn't fully know the difference between a dream threat and a real one. The adrenaline, the fear, the racing heartbeat, all of it is real, even though the tiger chasing you through your apartment definitely wasn't. In a strange way, your nightmares might be one of the oldest survival tools your brain has. But that raises another question. If dreaming is about rehearsing threats and processing emotion, why do we forget most of our dreams almost immediately? Ever notice that? You wake up from an intense, vivid dream, completely convinced you'll remember every detail. And then 20 minutes later, as you're brushing your teeth, it's gone. Just fragments left, like trying to hold water in your hands. This actually makes sense once you understand what's happening chemically. During REM sleep, the stage where most vivid dreaming occurs, your brain suppresses a chemical called norepinephrine, which plays a major role in memory formation. Basically, your brain is dreaming with the recording function turned off. It's less that you forget the dream, and more that it was never fully saved in the first place. Some researchers believe this might actually be a feature, not a flaw. Imagine if you remembered every single dream in full detail, every strange, chaotic, emotionally intense scenario your brain conjured up overnight. You wake up every morning with an overwhelming pile of surreal memories competing with your actual, real memories for space and attention. Forgetting most of it might be your brain's way of protecting your grip on reality. Now here's something that might surprise you. Not everyone forgets their dreams the same way. Some people remember their dreams vividly, almost every night. Others rarely remember dreaming at all. And it's not necessarily because those people aren't dreaming. Everyone dreams multiple times a night, whether they remember it or not. The difference usually comes down to how many times a person wakes up briefly during the night, even without realizing it. Those brief awakenings, even just a few seconds long, are often enough to lock a dream into memory before it fades. So if you're someone who barely remembers your dreams, it's not that your mind is quieter than everyone else's. It's just better at letting go. Let's talk about something even stranger: lucid dreaming. Have you ever been in the middle of a dream and suddenly realized, wait, this is a dream? That moment of realization, where you gain awareness while still technically asleep, is called lucid dreaming, and it's one of the most fascinating overlaps between consciousness and sleep that psychology has ever studied. In a lucid dream, that quiet, logical part of your brain, the one that normally shuts down during REM sleep, flickers back on just enough for you to recognize you're dreaming. And for some people, this creates an incredible sense of control. They can change the dream, fly if they want to, confront a fear head-on, even talk to a dream figure they've been avoiding in real life. Researchers have actually used lucid dreaming in therapeutic settings, especially for people dealing with recurring nightmares. Instead of running from the threat in the dream, patients are trained to recognize they're dreaming and consciously face it, or even reshape it entirely. And in many cases, this actually reduces the frequency and intensity of nightmares over time. Your mind, given the tools, can literally rewrite its own fears while you sleep. That's honestly one of the most hopeful things about dream psychology. Your subconscious isn't some fixed, unchangeable thing working against you. It's flexible. It can be trained, guided, even gently reasoned with, if you know how to approach it. But let's step back for a second, because there's a bigger question hiding underneath all of this. Why does your brain bother creating any of this at all? Wouldn't it be more efficient to just rest completely? This is where sleep science gets genuinely fascinating, because dreaming isn't just emotional processing. It's also deeply tied to memory and learning. During certain stages of sleep, your brain replays the events of your day, but not in a simple, linear way. It replays fragments, connects them to older memories, and starts building associations you never consciously made. This is part of why sleeping on a problem so often works. You go to bed stuck on something, and you wake up with a solution, or at least a new way of looking at it. Your brain wasn't idle overnight. It was quietly rearranging the pieces. There's actually a well-known example of this in scientific history. The chemist August Kekulé had been struggling for a long time to figure out the structure of the benzene molecule. Then one night, he had a dream about a snake biting its own tail, forming a circle. When he woke up, that image gave him the insight he needed. Benzene wasn't a straight chain of atoms like everyone assumed. It was a ring. That single dream helped reshape an entire branch of chemistry. Now, obviously, not every dream is going to hand you a scientific breakthrough, but the underlying mechanism is the same one working in your brain every single night. Your mind isn't just replaying memories while you sleep. It's reorganizing them, testing new connections, occasionally stumbling onto insight your waking brain was too rigid to find. This is where psychology becomes especially interesting, because it means dreaming isn't separate from your intelligence. It's part of it. It's your brain's way of thinking without the usual restrictions. Let's bring this back to something a little more personal, though, because dreams aren't just about biology and memory consolidation. They're about you specifically. Your fears, your unresolved feelings, your relationships. Have you ever had a recurring dream? The same scenario over and over, sometimes for years. Being back in school and realizing you never studied for an exam. Losing your teeth. Being unable to find your way home. Being chased through the same hallway. Recurring dreams tend to point at something unresolved. Not necessarily something traumatic, but something your mind hasn't fully worked through or accepted. A lot of people report that once they consciously deal with the underlying issue in real life, whether that's a stressful job, an unhealthy relationship, or an old insecurity, the recurring dream simply stops. It's like the dream was a loop your brain kept running, waiting for you to finally close it. That's uncomfortable to think about, honestly. It means your dreams might be pointing directly at the things you've been avoiding, not punishing you for it, just showing you again and again until you notice. And this connects to something psychologists call the continuity hypothesis. The idea that dreams aren't some separate, mystical realm completely disconnected from your waking life. Instead, they're deeply continuous with it. The people you interact with, the stresses you carry, the relationships you're navigating, all of it bleeds into your dreams, just filtered through symbol and emotion instead of straightforward thought. So if you dream about your boss yelling at you, it might not be about your boss specifically. It might be about a general feeling of being judged or not being good enough, something that's been quietly building in your waking life and finally found an outlet at night. Here's where it gets even more layered, though not all dreams are emotionally heavy. Some are just plain weird, bizarre, disconnected, nonsensical. You're at a birthday party that's also somehow a courtroom, and everyone there is speaking a language you don't know. But somehow you understand it anyway. Why does the brain do that? Part of the answer lies in how memory works during sleep. Your brain doesn't store memories in neat, organized folders like a filing cabinet. It stores them in networks, connected by association. A smell might connect to a memory of your childhood kitchen. A song might connect to an old relationship. A color might connect to an object from years ago you haven't thought about in a decade. While you're awake, your conscious mind keeps these associations mostly organized and separate. But during REM sleep, with your logical filter turned way down, those associative networks start blending together more freely. Memories that have no business being related suddenly get linked. That's why dreams often feel like a strange remix of your life. Familiar pieces rearranged into unfamiliar shapes. In a weird way, your dreams are proof of just how much information your brain is quietly holding on to. Faces you barely registered. Conversations you thought you forgot. Feelings you didn't even know you were carrying. All of it stored, all of it available, waiting for the right associative trigger to bring it back to the surface. Now, let's talk about nightmares specifically, because they deserve their own moment here. Nightmares aren't just bad dreams. They're your brain's alarm system, running at full volume. And while they're unpleasant, they're rarely random. Chronic stress, anxiety, unresolved trauma, even certain medications can increase how often nightmares occur. In many cases, nightmares are your mind's exaggerated attempt to process something overwhelming, using the most vivid, attention-grabbing method it has. Think about it this way. If your brain has something urgent it needs you to pay attention to, a quiet, calm dream probably isn't going to cut it. So it turns up the intensity, makes the threat bigger, makes the emotion sharper. It's not trying to torture you. In its own strange way, it's trying to get your attention. People who've gone through significant trauma often experience recurring nightmares related to that event, sometimes for years afterward. This isn't a sign of weakness or failure to move on. It's the brain's attempt, however imperfect, to process an experience that was too overwhelming to fully process at the time it happened. Therapy techniques like imagery rehearsal therapy have actually been developed specifically to help people consciously rewrite the ending of recurring nightmares while awake, which then, over time, changes how the dream unfolds during sleep. It's proof that even the darkest corners of our subconscious can be gently reshaped with the right approach. Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about something almost everyone has experienced but rarely talks about: sleep paralysis. You wake up, or at least you think you do, but your body won't move. You're fully aware, eyes maybe even open, but completely frozen. And often, terrifyingly, people report a sense of a presence in the room, something watching them. Sometimes even hallucinations, shadowy figures standing at the foot of the bed. This isn't supernatural, even though it absolutely feels that way in the moment. Sleep paralysis happens when your brain wakes up before your body catches up. During REM sleep, your brain essentially paralyzes your muscles to prevent you from physically acting out your dreams. It's a safety mechanism, but occasionally, your mind regains consciousness while that paralysis is still active, and because your brain is still partially in dream mode, it can generate vivid, often frightening hallucinations layered right on top of your very real, very awake environment. That's honestly one of the eeriest overlaps between dreaming and waking consciousness. Your rational mind is awake enough to know something is wrong, but your dreaming mind hasn't fully let go yet. The two states collide, and the result feels like something straight out of a horror movie, even though it's completely explainable. Understanding that alone has helped a lot of people manage the fear around it, because once you know what's actually happening biologically, it becomes a lot less terrifying and a lot more manageable, even if it's still deeply unsettling in the moment. So let's zoom out again. What does all of this actually tell us about ourselves? Here's the thing. Dreams are one of the only places where your unfiltered mind gets to speak without your conscious permission. No social mask, no polite filtering, no performing for anyone. Just your raw emotional processing, playing out in symbolic form, night after night, whether you're paying attention or not. That means your dreams, weird as they are, chaotic as they are actually one of the most honest windows into your inner world that exists. Not because they predict the future or send secret messages, but because they reveal what you're actually carrying underneath the surface. The things you're anxious about, the people you haven't let go of, the parts of yourself you haven't fully accepted yet. Most people never notice this connection. They wake up, shrug off a strange dream, and move on with their day, treating it as meaningless noise. But if you actually paid attention, patterns would start to emerge. Recurring themes, recurring emotions, recurring people. Your subconscious mind has been quietly trying to tell you something this entire time. It's just been speaking in a language most of us never bothered to learn. And maybe that's the real answer to the question we started with. Where you go when you sleep? You don't really go anywhere. You go inward. Every night, your mind takes everything you experienced, everything you felt, everything you're still holding on to, and it turns the volume down on logic just enough to let the emotional truth come through. It's not a different world. It's a deeper layer of the same one you live in every single day. That's kind of beautiful, if you think about it. In a world where we spend so much energy managing how we appear to others, filtering our thoughts, performing versions of ourselves that feel acceptable, sleep is the one place where none of that matters. Your mind finally gets to be completely, unapologetically honest, even if it expresses that honesty through strange, symbolic, sometimes downright bizarre stories. So the next time you wake up from a dream that felt oddly intense or oddly emotional or just plain strange, don't brush it off too quickly. Sit with it for a second. Ask yourself what feeling it left behind, more than what actually happened in it. That feeling is usually where the real message is hiding, because every single night, your mind builds an entire world out of nothing, just to help you understand yourself a little better. And honestly, that might be one of the most fascinating things the human brain does. Not despite the fact that it makes no logical sense, but because it doesn't have to. If this gave you a new way of thinking about your own mind, or made you see your dreams a little differently, do me a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe if you're new here, and share this with someone who's always talking about their weird dreams. There's a lot more of the human mind left to explore, and honestly, we're just getting started.